Think forward. Think Research Channel.
Hello, and thank you for joining this Burkenroad Symposium on Business and Society. Since 1990, the Burkenroad Institute has sought to aid managers in understanding the ethical dilemmas they confront in business. More and more, business leaders face moral obligations to their customers, employees, communities, and the natural environment, along with the traditional bottom-line concerns. Moral leadership is no longer seen as something separate from business leadership. Thus, the demands made on business leaders continue to grow, and the Institute, through research and education, helps meet the challenges of managing ethically. The Institute focuses on contributing to and disseminating a body of knowledge that addresses such value-laden choices. It encourages fundamental research into the effects of personal values on economic judgments and decisions, with a focus on resolving the ethical dilemmas confronting managers and helping them recognize and respond to their moral obligations. The Institute's centerpiece, the annual Symposium on Business and Society, has become recognized as a forum in which the moral responsibilities of business leaders are provocatively and intelligently discussed. The symposium has not shied away from controversy, tackling such issues as lying in business, the near void of women at the top of corporate hierarchies, the obligations of business to the natural environment, race in the workplace, the overcompensation of executives, and the role of private enterprise in public corruption. Today's symposium took place on Tulane University's New Orleans campus on November 12, 2004. Our topic is social entrepreneurship, and our guest will be explaining to us what this strange term means, sharing with us examples of how social entrepreneurs have changed the world, and perhaps most importantly, encouraging each of us to support this growing movement, both locally and globally. Our first speaker, David Bornstein, has degrees from McGill University and New York University. He is author of How to Change the World, Social Entrepreneurs and the Power of New Ideas. Described by the New York Times as must-reading for anyone who cares about building a more equitable and stable world, it chronicles the work of people who are addressing social problems on a major scale across the world. His first book, The Price of a Dream, The Story of the Grameen Bank, traces the global emergence of the anti-poverty strategy called microcredit, and was selected by the San Francisco Chronicle as one of the best business books of 1996. His articles have appeared in publications including the Atlantic Monthly and the New York Times. He co-wrote the 2-hour PBS documentary series, To Our Credit, which focuses on microcredit initiatives. David Bornstein.
I'd like to begin just by asking a poll question. Are we headed in, thinking globally, worldwide, are we headed in a good direction or are we headed in the wrong direction? Is the world getting better or is it getting worse? And think about where you get your information and just hold on to that idea. My own journey in understanding what social entrepreneurship is, and really some things that have truly made me see the world differently, was when I was a journalist in the early 90s and I went to Bangladesh, really just to find out if this organization called the Grameen Bank was actually doing what it said. And at the time it was lending money to about 500,000 women. The loans, like this woman whose name is Sitara Begum, she's holding her bank book en route to her meeting. The loans on average at the time were about $70, and she would pay back the loan at the rate of $1.40 per week. She would say perhaps purchase a cow or goats or bamboo, and at the end of the year she would pay off the loan and she would own the cow and the goats. And so, as Professor Brief mentioned, this idea, I wrote a book about the Grameen Bank. By the time I finished my book, I'm a slow writer, but I'm not that slow, the bank had 2 million borrowers. That was in '96. Today, it's got 3.7 million members. It's lent billions of dollars. And more importantly, the idea of microcredit, this notion that you can make loans to poor people, poor women, people who are illiterate, people who don't have any collateral, and include them in the global economic system so that they really can take control of their lives, has spread around the world. So there's now thousands of organizations that provide loans to poor women and poor men around the world. Some estimates say they reach as many as 50 million, or in some cases 70 million families if you include the broadest circle of microcredit. So that's quite a lot of people. That's hundreds of millions of people being affected by this idea. Most of that growth has just taken place in the last 7 or 8 years. The news focuses on some of the things that are less important and some of the things that are truly changing the world. In my own research, when I finished my book on the Grameen Bank, my main question was, what do we do? How do we create organizations like the Grameen Bank? And initially I thought that there would be a very strong implication that the government should go out and design organizations and have public policies that would create Grameen banks. But when I tested that with what I had seen, I saw that that model didn't fit in the way the Grameen Bank actually came about. It had been founded by an entrepreneur, Muhammad Yunus. And when I say an entrepreneur, I mean someone, we know very well what an entrepreneur looks like in business, someone who has those strange brew of qualities that enable a person to create great institutions that really have major impact. So, you know, an entrepreneur sees over the horizon to an opportunity that other people don't yet perceive or don't believe in. They're able to mobilize resources. They're able to build a team. And they have this kind of growth orientation so that over time they're sort of driving the train full speed while they're still laying the track in front of them. And they're constantly self-correcting and iterating, so they fail forward. They fail, but the failure moves forward. They respond to their mistakes. And I think the single biggest quality, defining quality of an entrepreneur, social or business, is the way they respond to failure. So I finished my book by saying, wow, if society wants to see more organizations like the Grameen Bank, we really should probably look for social entrepreneurs, these wildflowers who have these entrepreneurial qualities but want to put poverty in museums like Muhammad Yunus, rather than, say, build the world's greatest running shoe company, for example. When I finished that book, that was my conclusion. I actually was talking with Susan Davis here, who had worked with the Grameen Bank, and she said, well, you know, you really should interview Bill Drayton, the man on the right here, because he founded an organization called Ashoka in the early 80s, and Ashoka's mission is to go around the world looking for social entrepreneurs and to provide them with funding and bring them into a network so that they can really amplify their efforts. And they've supported more than 1,400 people in 50 countries around the world. And what I had the privilege of doing over the last 5 years is to travel to 8 different countries and interview 100 social entrepreneurs. And I write about a number of them in my book. And so what I'd like to do is share one, and if we have time, 2 stories here with you, and then sort of look at some of the insights. So this is a woman named Jaru Bilamoria. She's a social entrepreneur from Bombay, India. She's a social worker. And she had actually studied in New York City at the New School and was working with the Coalition for the Homeless, where she gained a lot of insights into the kind of outreach you can do with people on the streets. When she moved back to Bombay, she decided that she wanted to work with street children in India. There's a huge proliferation of street children in India, across Latin America, in many parts of the world, in Africa, because of the real pressures in villages, the economic pressures that make it difficult for families to support their children. So you will often have a little boy, a 9-year-old boy, walking through the streets of Bombay, selling Marlboro cigarettes and Wrigley's spearmint gum, sleeping in a tea stall or sleeping in a train platform, and sending remittances home to his family. And actually, this is quite honorable for him to do. I mean, when he goes back to the village, he's treated quite well. But when he's in the city, he's a little barefoot boy in Bombay who doesn't have any protections. And so Jaru placed some of her graduate students. She was actually a teacher at an institute, social working school. She would place her graduate students in Bombay's night shelters and started working with the street kids to see what their problems were. And what would happen is she started giving out her home phone number to people because, you know, if they had any problems, they could call them in case of emergency. And she'd started getting phone calls at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. My friend broke his leg. He's in a train station. or someone I know has tuberculosis, or my friend was beaten up by a transit police officer. And so she would get out of bed, go to the train station, collect the child, bring him to a hospital or an emergency shelter, and then she would spend the next 3 months trying to figure out what services are available in Bombay to help to assist this child in a more systematic way, not just in an ad hoc fashion. And what she found was there were actually thousands of organizations in Bombay that were working with children. Not all of them were good, but there were lots of them. In Bombay, none of them were talking to each other. So Jaru got this idea, why don't we create a network? And with her graduate students, she went around and looked at 100 child service organizations in Bombay. And she asked if they would join the network to work together. And 86 said no, but 14 said yes. That's not a great winning percentage. Some people might be daunted and say, maybe this isn't such a great idea, but she believed in the idea. So with those 14 organizations, she formed this network and called it Childline. She spent quite a long time working with the Indian government to get a hotline. And she eventually got the number 1098. It took her 3 years of faxes and phone calls and using whatever political strings she could pull to get this toll-free hotline. She got a grant of $6,000 from a foundation to get this whole thing going. And then her real creative insight was she had to figure out who's going to answer the calls. And there wasn't enough money to pay social workers or paramedics, so she decided that she would train the street youth themselves, the most responsible street youth, to be sort of paramedics. And they would answer the calls, phones would be in a shelter, and they would go to the train station or wherever and collect the child. And in the other organizations in the network would provide educational services or health services or legal services or services for AIDS or disabled children. So with this very simple model in 1996, Childline was launched. And in its first year, it fielded 6,600 phone calls from street youth. And it rescued 850 children from different levels of distress. So I'll give you an example of a call. There was a little girl who was 2 years old walking in a train station in Bombay, a train station called Dadar train station. And she was naked. She had burns on her chest, and she was abandoned. No one was watching her. A commuter en route to a business meeting had his cell phone, and he saw this child. He had heard about Childline, and he dialed 1098. A bunch of kids, street kids in a shelter, answered the phone, and they raced to the train station. They looked for the little girl, but she wasn't where the man said she was. So they spent an hour looking for her in the train station. They eventually found she'd been taken in by a beggar who wanted to use her to beg. And they knew that the man said it was his daughter, and they knew it wasn't really his daughter. So they argued to have the child taken to a hospital, but the man wouldn't release her. So they went to the police. The police sided with the beggar. So they had to spend about 6 hours fighting, and they're very tenacious, these kids. They eventually, through making a couple of phone calls, got permission to take the girl. They brought her to a hospital, and through the Childline network of organizations, over a period of a year, she was adopted by a middle-class family. And the street kids named her Seema. So this man's phone call totally changed her life. I mean, in the most dramatic way. If we fast forward to today, what has happened to this idea? It's spread to 55 cities in India. It's fielded more than 5 million phone calls. It's rescued more than 100,000 children in various levels, some life-threatening emergencies. It's actually been adopted by the Indian government as the national child protection system. Because the Indian government signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child and ratified it, but they didn't have real tools to protect the kids in this new situation. And they didn't have enough money. So here you have a social entrepreneur who created this system, a tool. The government adopted it and helped it become a national program. Now, how do you create a national program? Childline is essentially a brand in some sense. And this is where the business overlap comes in. If you arrive in a train station in India, in any one of those 55 cities, and you're a runaway or you've just come to the city from the countryside, you're very likely to see a child standing there with this poster saying, don't forget about Childline. This is your emergency system if you're a child. Creating a national brand is not something that Jaru, a social worker, knew how to do, and it's not something the government knew how to do. but it was something that Ogilvy and Mather, the global marketing firm, knew how to do. So Giroux went to Ogilvy and Mather, and she sort of hounded them, pounded on their doors for many days, until they agreed to help her figure out, how do we create a national brand? What should it look like? What should the logo be? Should we translate the name Childline into India's 18 different languages, or should we just translate it phonetically, so it's always just said as Childline? These very sophisticated marketing questions are why this system has worked. Another relationship that Giroux created, when these calls were coming in, they realized that there was a tremendous amount of information telling people what Indian society was like, what the situations were on the streets, and it wasn't being captured. So she approached an executive at the Tata Consultancy Group, which is one of India's largest computer companies. It's like IBM. And again, through a long process of nurturing this relationship, he eventually agreed to help Childline create a computer system called ChildNet. And this system is very ingenious. I mean, these programmers are quite brilliant. They've created a system where street kids who often can't read enter information through picture signals on the screen. And then they have software that looks at things like, boy, there's a lot of places, there's a lot of train stations in India where there's an unusual amount of tuberculosis. Many calls coming in from this train station with this problem. We should locate a health center in that station. Or we didn't realize that in the city of Varanasi, where there's a big sari industry, many children tend to be abducted because they have little nimble fingers, and they're used in this industry. So these are some of the insights that came up through this network that had been created by this company. Now, because Childline is a government program, it's actually officially a government program, you now have this calls coming from street children into this network, analyzed with this very sophisticated software, and it's now used to inform the government's national child protection policy, end to end. And all of this has been built just in the last 8 years. So Giroux Billamore is actually not a very good manager, admittedly so. So she has stepped down from running Childline. She doesn't want to be there all the time. She's passed it on to more professional administrators. And she's launched Child Helpline International. And she's now working to take this model and get it going in other countries. And so she's working in Zimbabwe and Nigeria and Cambodia and Mongolia and about 5 other countries to see if this idea, a similar idea, can take hold. She's having quite a bit of success. So social entrepreneurship can be thought of as a new profession, a meta profession. These are the formal jobs of all the people that I interviewed. It's actually not an exhaustive list. All of these people, and this is around the world, in the United States, like JB, or globally, in Bangladesh, India, South Africa, you see people who have a certain set of skills. They've worked in a field for quite a amount of time. They see a problem, and then they go out there and they start an institution or a new organization to solve that problem in a new way. Because this profession has grown up around the world and because it's so new, it hasn't yet been systematized. So there's this enormous knowledge of how to solve social problems out there that hasn't yet come into our knowledge of. For example, the government doesn't have all the insights that the social entrepreneurs have. Business schools these people need the skills of the business sector in order to be able to do things. So there's a huge bridge that has to be built in order to get the social entrepreneurs up to speed on a bunch of things like finance and marketing, just like in the example of Giroux. The incredible leverage that you have when you bring these two things together. And then there's also certain qualities that lead to social change, really effective social change. You see that the social entrepreneurs are great listeners, almost without exception. There's a real growth orientation in the temperament there. It's not everybody who drives the train full speed while they're laying the track. They're very good at sharing credit. They're great team builders. It's not about triumphant individuals. It's about pulling people together in new social configurations that really have much more impact and much more intelligence than the systems that we have in society. There are more social entrepreneurs in the world than there are terrorists. It's important to know that. And my sense of how the world is going right now, just to come back to my original question, is that there are tremendous positive forces, and there's also tremendous negative forces, as we know, reading the newspapers. We hear every day about the negative forces. And yet we forget, or we don't hear at all about the social entrepreneurs. It's very important that we focus on this stuff because all social change begins with belief, the belief that change is possible. And that belief doesn't emerge spontaneously. It needs to be nourished with stories and ideas like these. So thank you for allowing me to share some stories with you. And now you will hear from the real thing. Thank you very much.
J. Gregory Dees, a professor at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business, asserted, "We need innovative solutions to social problems, and increasingly societies are realizing that private citizens, acting in entrepreneurial ways, blending business tools with relevant social expertise, are the best hope for finding these solutions." A graduate of Yale University and Harvard Divinity School, our next speaker is changing the future for low-income youth by combining market savvy with a conscience. In 1993, J.B. Schramm founded College Summit while directing a teen center and low-income housing project. By enabling average students to shine in the admissions process, College Summit is helping erase the market gap and improve the earning potential of low-income youth. Its 79% college enrollment rate is nearly double the national rate of 46% for high school graduates from the same income level. Among his many honors, Fast Company magazine named him among the country's top 20 social capitalists. He also was one of the first 4 North Americans named to the Ashoka Fellowship for Social Entrepreneurship and won the National Association for College Admissions Counseling's highest award for expanding access to higher education. J.B. Schramm.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm chapter 13 in David's book. This is the 13th Burkenroad Symposium. I may be the first Burkenroad panelist who's a former student of a former Burkenroad panelist. Cornel West, who some of you may have heard a few years ago, was an inspiring professor of mine in college. And that gave me a goal. And my goal is that by the 26th Burkenroad Symposium, a College Summit alumni, one of the students who's first in their families to go to college, will be a panelist here as well. What I'm hoping to do is to spend 1 minute describing the relationship between college and reducing poverty in a community. And then I want to tell you 2 stories. The first, to give you a sense of what College Summit does in a community. The second, to give you a sense of our understanding, our definition of social entrepreneurship. First off, College Summit is a college transition system that communities use. School districts, communities use College Summit as a tool so that every student in that community gets the kind of post-secondary transition support that middle-class students get. The student who is first in his family to go to college basically ends poverty in that family line forever. He's going to make $1 million more over the course of his career, and his children are going to be almost twice as likely to go to college themselves. Now, you're all probably familiar with the fact that low-income students are about 1/3 as likely to go to college as our middle-class kids. The question is why? And most people say it's a matter of preparation. If the low-income students were prepared, they'd go. And there's no question that K-12 reform is critical, that preparation is core. But it's not the whole story. There's a fascinating study of all high school seniors in the U.S. and it found that the students from the low-income quartile who got A's in high school go to college at the same rate as the students from the top income quartile who got D's in high school. So even when the low-income student is aware and prepared and performing, there is a flaw in the college transition system. And the costs of that are enormous. That's according to a congressional commission, every year in the United States there's 200,000 low-income students who graduate from high school who are college ready who don't go. So if the system got corrected for those students to go on, not only would we be seeing 200,000 families ending poverty in their family line, but we'd see an additional $80 billion in tax revenue. And here's a study that the civic leaders here in New Orleans and the mayor, I think, would be very interested in. CEOs for Cities just published a report looking at the economic growth of U.S. cities. And their conclusion was the #1 driver of urban economic growth is the college attainment rate of the adult population. College is a powerful social change lever. I was running a teen center in a low-income housing project in D.C. We were doing what you're supposed to do to get kids to college. We had an awareness program so the kids were visiting colleges in 7th grade. We did preparation so that they were doing tutoring for academic support throughout junior and senior high school. But nevertheless, year in and year out, the kids who routinely went on to college were the couple kids with super high test scores. Because the system works well for them. Colleges like Tulane pay the College Board, ACT, for lists of these superstar students, and then they have bidding wars over them. At the other end of the spectrum, we had 10 kids who just were not ready for college. But then we had 40 students in the middle. And if you just looked at their numbers, you couldn't tell. A bunch of 900 SAT, 2.9, 3.1 GPA. But if you looked at the students holistically, trying to get a sense of how resilient they are, how they handle trouble, character, creativity, in the same way that middle-class students get evaluated holistically by colleges, by looking at essays and recommendations and so forth. If you could do that with these kids, you saw that most of them were college material. Like Tanya, who had a 850 SAT score, but she was the one who managed to get a 3.3 GPA while holding down a 20-hour-a-week job and being the primary caregiver for a niece. Or Tyrone, who was frankly just bored at school. But when there was a shooting in the neighborhood, he was the one that organized the police and the parents and the community to come together at our teen center to cool things down. Interesting young people who we want equipped with college degrees. We just got too frustrated seeing these kids, most of whom would just finish high school, leave the teen center, say they were going to go to college, but never go. And 6 months later, their eyes would be dulled on the street. So we tried to look for the clues. Why does this system not work? Why are there so many college-capable kids not going? We saw 3 clues. Clue number 1, when we looked at the middle class, we saw that it takes 2 kinds of adults to get a kid into college. One is the expert college counselor, the resource person who in the U.S. has 500 kids on their plate. Second role is the college experienced parent who nags. Right? You know, the breakfast table conversation, you're not going out Thursday unless I see that essay. In our neighborhood, the kids had college counselors, but they didn't have the college experienced parent. America is asking low-income students to do what middle-class students can't do, which is to manage their own way through this application process alone. So what College Summit did is we go with school districts, we train the teachers to play the manager role, the nagging role, during a once-a-week class or period for all the students senior year. Second clue we saw was that in the middle class there's a college culture. Middle-class kids just grow up bumping into adults and cousins and neighbors who are talking college. So we thought, well, who's the most influential person to a 17-year-old low-income student? And the answer was another 17-year-old student. So we work with school districts to change the college culture of the school by taking the most influential students from the junior class, about 20% of the junior class. Not the top kids, because our experience is the top students are not the most influential. Like when Cherie is going to college, the other kids roll their eyes. You know, we've been knowing Cherie was going to go to college since she was 5 years old. If you can convert the mid-tier students, that's when you can shift the culture. So 20%, the better than their numbers, mid-tier students attend a 4-day residential workshop held on a college campus. And in those 4 days, they do two things. One is they complete their application, portfolio, writing the essay, meeting with college counselors, coming up with an online application. More importantly, they become a veteran of the process. So that now back in that high school, September 1 senior year, you've got every senior going through a once-a-week curriculum, helping them make their post-secondary plan and create their portfolio with a teacher we've trained to play the manager role, and 20% of the students in that class are veterans. And so they can tell their peers, yeah, I've done my essay, want to see it? Those are the first two clues. The third clue is that the colleges really wanted these students. College's problem is they all know who the top kids are because they pay for lists, but that pool of students is not big enough for them to hit their diversity goals. So the only way colleges can hit their goals is if they go to the second tier or the mid-tier and find students who are better than their numbers. We help colleges do that and enroll those students. Earlier, Art referred to our results, 79% college enrollment rate for 5,000 students we've worked with in 5 different regions of the country, from rural West Virginia to inner city Chicago. Students have been staying in college at a rate of 80%. The bottom line is there's 200,000 low-income students who can make it in college who aren't going. We just need to fix the system so they go. Here's the second story, and this is to get at our definition of social entrepreneurship. A young man named Jose Silva grew up in Denver, age of 14, standing with his best friend. His best friend gets shot and killed on a drive-by. Drops out of high school twice, ends up finishing finally with a 2.5 GPA. Not necessarily college material, but his teacher said, this young man is better than his numbers. Fortunately, his school did College Summit for all the students. So let's take a look at Jose from 2 different perspectives. First, from a charity perspective. Gee, Jose, neat kid, want to help him. If I can figure out a way to help him, I'll get some philanthropy to fund it so I can help Jose and maybe some other students. But unfortunately, only a few other students. And that's the problem with the charity model. Philanthropy can't fund the addition of more and more and more and more students. Philanthropy can't scale to serve every kid in the community, in every community in this country that needs it. That's one of the reasons we have difficulty in this country reducing poverty. Is because when social models are solely dependent on philanthropy, they can't solve the problem. They can only provide a demonstration of how the problem could potentially be solved if there were unlimited resources. Instead, let's take a look at Jose from a social entrepreneurship perspective. At College Summit, we define social entrepreneurship as reducing poverty by uncovering overlooked value and then changing the system so that that value gets realized. So College Summit, our core belief is that in America, low-income talent is undervalued. So the question is, can you correct the market so that that value can get realized? So how does that look? Well, school districts are increasingly measured on the college enrollment rate of their students. So College Summit helps school districts get a better grade. We provide training, online tools, curriculum. Schools pay us for that. Colleges already pay College Board and ACT for lists. Trouble is, College Board and ACT don't have comprehensive data on low-income students. We do. Colleges pay us for that. In our business plan, in 4 years, fee-for-service revenue from schools and colleges will cover our variable costs. Will cover the costs of adding another student. And we believe that's a tipping point in social change. Because in that scenario, philanthropy can do what it can do well, which is start a new site, provide a level of funding that doesn't have to grow and grow and grow. And then fees for service, which is when institutions who aren't doing this out of altruism, they're doing it out of self-interest. They cover the cost of adding student after student after student. That's how a community can solve this problem for all low-income students. Jose was better than his numbers. He ends up going to a community college, gets a scholarship after 2 years to go to the University of Denver, graduates, and last year he became the youngest person in the history of the city of Denver to run for the school board. And he didn't win. He didn't win, but he got 11,000 votes. And I don't know, Mayor, is that a good? That's not a bad first showing, huh? I'd like to share 2 lessons that we've learned about social entrepreneurship. The first is to build a social enterprise, you've got to be a pit bull. You know, you got to be able to meet opposition, meet closed doors, and get excited about that. Get excited about getting around that door. When there's no resources, get excited about finding those resources. And I want to read a portion of a student essay. Part of the joy of working at College Summit is we get to help students find their voice. And here's a young man, Endemicio Santana, who from his essay I think showed that he's got a bit of pit bull in him. The first time I played the baritone, it sounded like 2 4x4 trucks honking at each other before they crashed into each other. It was so bad that I turned red when everyone laughed at me. At home, the sound seemed to be magnified by the walls of my room. No one in my house wanted me to play. One Saturday morning after I woke up and ate breakfast, I went to my room to practice. I entered my room and looked for my baritone, but couldn't find it. I got scared, thinking that someone had stolen it. I looked for my mom to ask if she had seen my baritone. I found her in the garage trying to hide it. "What are you doing?" I asked her. "I don't want to hear this mess anymore," she answered. I took it from her and ran as fast as I could to my room with my mom behind me screaming, "Don't play! Don't play!" That day, I practiced 3 hours straight. Everyone screaming at me every 5 minutes, "Shut up!" I practiced and I practiced. I told myself, I will not let anyone stop me. I will do this. I will tame this beast of brass. Second lesson we've learned, do what you do best. So for some, that means starting a social enterprise. For others, that means bringing your expertise in marketing or human resources or technology. College Summit's only grown to where it has because we've had amazing people join me in building it who brought expertise. And finally, College Summit is in 5 communities right now. Chicago, Denver, California, West Virginia, and DC. We are having a new round of site expansion. So if there are community leaders who are interested in building a college transition system community-wide, please contact us. We're starting a new round in the next month. I just want to again say thank you for your time and for your interest in this field.
Our final speaker was born here in New Orleans and raised in Lafayette, Louisiana. With degrees from Georgetown University and Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, Susan M. Davis has initiated innovative economic development strategies with minorities and women from New York to Bangladesh. In 1997, she helped establish the Grameen Foundation USA, which combines microfinance, new technologies, and creativity to empower economically the world's poorest people. Today it has a network of 46 partners in 20 countries and has impacted approximately 2.5 million lives. It works with Grameen Bank, the pioneer of microfinance. Founded by an economist, the Bangladesh Bank makes small loans to very poor people to start or expand tiny businesses. It has lent more than $4.4 billion in amounts averaging under $200 to 3.7 billion borrowers. Ms. Davis is external advisor to the Director General of the International Labor Organization and is leading the startup of Ashoka's Global Academy for Social Entrepreneurship. Susan Davis.
Bonjour, mes amis, les éléphants roulés. It's great to be back home in New Orleans, born and raised in New Orleans and Lafayette. It's wonderful to be back. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm here to share some stories with you about how a girl from here got to wander the world and end up being a connector and a catalyst and a change maker, and tell you about some incredible people and places and organizations that also share my belief that we can actually make poverty a thing of the past. I lifted my head up and always was looking for the next horizon. And so when I went searching for all these new horizons, I got this offer to go to Bangladesh. Now, David's told you about Grameen Bank and the founder, Muhammad Yunus. We've drafted him to become the first member of the Ashoka Global Academy, which is a global association of change makers, which I'm helping to get started. And the reason why we've now put him as one of the first members is because he's not only created this bank, but he's helped to market the idea. And one of the strategies he's used is he created the Grameen Trust in Bangladesh, and later we've created the Grameen Foundation here in the States, which actually helped to spread this idea. We actually give seed funding and startup support to others who want to copy and replicate the idea of microfinance. And it's created the Grameen Global Network of more than 120 partners in 40 countries. Yunus also was one of the founders of the Microcredit Summit, which actually tried to scale up this global movement. But he didn't stop with just creating the bank. He's also created more than 20 companies in Bangladesh, including Grameen Phone, Grameen Solar Company, Grameen Technology, Grameen Fisheries, Agriculture, Grameen Venture Capital, Mutual Fund, you name it, it's there. We've held a dialogue between Grameen and Ashoka Fellows on how to scale up business social ventures. An incredible social entrepreneur. So the question is, can you actually eradicate poverty through profits? A provocative idea. C.K. Prahalad's written a book on that very topic, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. I encourage you to actually pick it up and read it because it's one of the most influential books of our times. That idea, the last 5 years, has been sweeping through the world. Certainly through the business community. And this thinker is now on the top 10 list of influential thinkers and management gurus. But it's actually influencing the work of multinational companies and trying to get them to look at the bottom of the economic pyramid, the bottom 4 billion people, and to look at them not as the poor burden, the poor as problem, but the poor as the entrepreneurial assets and the poor as potential consumers, and to look at how we craft win-win solutions. A very different way at looking at the bottom of the pyramid, and certainly a way and an insight informed by the dynamic experience of Grameen Bank. Ashoka has taken our own work and crafted a strategy that we call full economic citizenship. And it's how we link social entrepreneurs and businesses to create these win-win partnerships. And how social entrepreneurs themselves can create and scale up business social ventures of the kind that Yunus has created in Bangladesh, and many people all around the world have been able to create. Now, we created the foundation in the United States back in 1997. Professor Yunus was actually our first donor with $7,000. And we wanted to do that so that we could actually mobilize resources from the United States, money and muscle and ideas, and be able to use the philanthropic resources to to kickstart the institutions around the world that were interested. Grameen Bank doesn't need any money. They wanted to actually help us spread the idea and the movement. Microfinance at the end of 2002 was reaching globally 67 million people, of which 46.7 million were the poorest. This was through some 2,500 microfinance institutions. This is only about 10% of the global demand. Grameen Foundation USA decided, well, we've got to do our part in being able to reach that. We're actually now reaching some 869,000 families. Each of them probably have an average of 5 in their families, so that's some 4.5 million people that we're impacting. Now, the largest markets we're working with are in Asia, because that's where the largest number of poor folks are. And our strategy is to work with high growth partners in those markets, and always to focus and work with partners who are targeting the poorest. And we will try and leverage philanthropic resources to connect with the markets, banks, governments, and foundations. And we'll also try to ensure the optimal use of technology in microfinance. We've got a technology center based in Seattle. And we always are trying to pull in high-level volunteers. That's a very key part of our strategy. An example of some of the results in being able to scale up some of the practitioners. Share, which is the largest microfinance organization in India, was able to do the first securitization of their loan portfolio, which was the largest in history. The second time in the industry that it's been done. What we were able to do is take philanthropic dollars, $325,000, and guarantee that for the largest bank in India, ICICI Bank. They wanted to buy a quarter of Share's portfolio. Basically, they bought $4.3 million worth of their portfolio. So that was 12 to 1 leverage on those philanthropic dollars. That's how you actually tap the capital markets. Now, what Share was able to do with that $4.3 million is reach another 25,000 poor clients in the first quarter of this year. ICICI Bank went into the market and sold it to another bank. And they've actually proved then there's a market for these kinds of package loans. So it's business now. Business for microfinance loans changes the whole notion of this, which is back to C.K. Prahalad's thesis. There is a fortune to be made at the bottom of the pyramid, that you can eradicate poverty through doing business. Last example I'll cite is in replicating the Grameen Phone project. Grameen Phone is the largest cell phone company in South Asia. It's amazing. They did it as a joint venture with Telenor from Norway. They also formed a nonprofit company, Grameen Telecom. They were able to then, through the microcredit process, put the cell phones in the hands of village women where there was no electricity. They had them solar powered because they had created Grameen Solar Company. So these women were able to sell phone service to their neighbors. So they were the village phone lady. They made a booming profit. There are some 60,000 now phone ladies operating in throughout Bangladesh, solar packs running their cell phones. So it was great. We came in and documented the business model, took this to Uganda, showed it to MTN, the largest telecommunications firm. They said, wow, this looks like a great business. We did a joint venture with them, little us, Grameen Foundation USA, you know, and we went into business. There are now 400 village phone ladies in Uganda operating. We'll have 5,000 pretty soon, and we're looking at our second replication in a nearby African country. It works. It's good business. Our strategic plan over the next 5 years, just to share with you, we've set out 3 goals. To reach 5 million new borrowers through our partners, make sure half get out of poverty, champion 3 innovations, To do that, we're going to raise $80 million, $56 million of which will be from private sources, and we're going to leverage $240 million. Big, hairy, audacious goals. We also work with two partners in the U.S. I wanted to just mention. It's not just around the world. In New York and Dallas, two of the wealthiest cities in the U.S. There's also pockets of poverty also. Project Enterprise in New York, we've been working. It's based in Harlem. Over 1,000 clients. There are 62 active peer groups making a couple of hundred loans. It's a struggle. It's not a sustainable program like the others. We need bigger loan volumes. But it's an incredible dynamic program, and we've just had Entrepreneur of the Year gala, which brought together the best entrepreneurs, and there have been an increase in loan volume. Dallas as well, over 400 microloans, and the repayment rates are 93%. Ashoka is one of these programs that elects fellows across all ages, education, class, race. There are no barriers all over the world. And that's one of the things. Social entrepreneurship has no limits. And I've met social entrepreneurs from everywhere. Clearly, there's a need for social entrepreneurs when you look at the list of problems and the potential solutions. And how do you get them? How do you get the solutions? When you look at who drives change and you scratch the surface, usually you figure out the somebody behind it is a social entrepreneur. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do behind Ashoka, is we're trying to encourage the creation of a citizen sector that is entrepreneurial and productive and globally integrated, and encourage everybody in society to become a change maker. Social entrepreneurs actually unlock the potential for people to become change makers, working individually in their own initiative, like JB, working together in groups, and well at putting together the missing infrastructure, the kind of missing financing pieces, or the regulatory framework, or other infrastructure that might be missing. We support the social entrepreneurs who we elect with a living stipend and try to foster this collaboration through different strategies and provide contacts, and that's our social venture capital approach. And we try to measure the impact of their success, and in fact they stick with it over time. 97% of them do, and 88% of their fellows actually get copied, and 59% report having had at least national policy impact, many regional and international. On average, at least impacting 174,000 people. We get our support from peers, from business entrepreneurs by and large. All private support. Ashoka doesn't take government policy. When you measure impact, one of the key questions people often ask is, well, September 11th, that changed everything. And I would ask, did it change the world? Yeah. I mean, September 11th changed my world, and I share with you where I was. 9/11, 2001, I was in New York City, running around my apartment thinking I had an electrical fire. The smell was so strong. So September 11th, 2002, I found myself in Cairo. I decided I could do something positive by going to the Middle East and starting the Ashoka program in the Arab world. And I went and was meeting there with child laborers who are working outside Minya, who have no opportunity to go to school and are working in extremely hazardous conditions. And what we started is the Arab Region Initiative for Social Entrepreneurship, to try to engage volunteers and the business and social sectors to try to support social entrepreneurs there, to generate non-political systemic change to lead to progress. I thought it was a better way than, you know, bombing. What can I say? And so, right at the time when the Abu Ghraib crisis was at its peak, we opened our office and unveiled to the public in Cairo 14 Ashoka Fellows that are working in fantastic fields, organizing youth as assets, organizing the informal sector, empowering the deaf and mute, fostering critical thinking among children, addressing real needs, showing positive things that made them proud. The message I leave you with is that you can be the change you want. You know, you hear so many people complaining, politicians always, when is somebody going to fix this? And the somebody is often, you realize, not going to turn up until you realize that you are somebody. Like Mary Lee Orr, when she realized I'm somebody that can solve the problem, and she created that organization, Mothers Against Air Pollution. When I want something to be, I know that it requires me. And that's the philosophy that we have at Ashoka, that actually everybody can be a change maker at different levels. My only conclusion I can draw from that is never underestimate the power of social entrepreneurship and the difference that you can make. You know, someday when your children or grandchildren say, or they're touring a museum and they're looking at pictures and they're saying, my God, did people really live this way? That these conditions of poverty, they existed? And you say, yes, well, unfortunately, you know, they did. But don't worry, like apartheid and slavery, we stopped it. We stopped it. Thank you.
Laura Tyson, Dean of the London School of Business, defined a social entrepreneur as one driven by a social mission, a desire to find innovative ways to solve social problems that are not being or cannot be addressed by either the market or public sector. She describes these entrepreneurs as a new kind of business hero. Thank you again for joining me to discuss this important topic. If you'd like more information about the Burkenroad Institute or for a complete unedited video of this symposium, please contact us at area code 504-865-5666 or email us at burkenroad.institute@tulane.edu. Until next time, I'm Arthur Brief.